This is the Hellfire Hellcat, a woman who fully embraces the chaos of the new world after having lived a repressed life in the pre-war times. With her suit of power armor encasing her and a heavy incinerator in her hands, she'll set fire to the world she once knew and be born again in the wasteland. The special stats for this build are 5 strength, 5 perception, 7 endurance, 2 charisma, 6 intelligence, 1 agility, and 3 luck. For the most part, this is a fairly balanced build in terms of the stats, but the low agility will limit how useful that is, but the high endurance means you should be able to take more damage than most. Perks for this character build are split into 3 different sections: Major, Minor, and Role-Playing. Major perks are the ones you must grab as soon as you possibly can. Minor perks are still important to the build, but you don't need to rush so much to get to them. And finally, the role-playing perks aren't essential, but do add a little flavour to the character overall. The major perks for the build are Heavy Gunner, Demolition Expert, Armourer, and Science. Heavy Gunner is the primary damage perk of the build. Get all the ranks of it in order to boost the damage of your weapon. Demolition Expert is the secondary damage perk of the build. If doubling the damage of your weapon wasn't good enough, then throw on this perk for even more hurt. Plus the throwing arc for grenades and the like can be pretty dang handy too. Armourer and Science are the crafting perks. With the two combined, you will have all needed options for your armour, and nearly everything unlocked for your main weapon too. On to minor perks, where we have Black Widow, Life Giver, Bloody Mess, and Gun Nut. The perk I actually wanted this character to have was Lady Killer, but turns out I ended up with Black Widow instead. While not to plan, you do tend to fight more men than women in Fallout 4, so this actually works out better, giving you a pretty regular damage boost, along with the odd improvement to some speech checks. The Life Giver perk is the most underrated one in the game, in my opinion. 60 extra hit points is nothing to snuff at, but the constant health regeneration is why I love it. Bloody Mess gives you even more damage output. It's only now that I'm writing the script for this video, but I realised just how heavy into damage perks I went with this build. Might explain why everything kept dying so quickly. Final minor perk is Gun Nut. You should only need a couple of ranks of this in order to get your main weapon up to maximum damage. The role-playing perks are Blacksmith and Big Leagues. This character does wield a melee weapon, but you won't see it at all in the video, as I entirely forgot about it. It's nice to have the melee option, and will add a little flavour to the character, but it's by no means needed, considering just how crazy strong the main weapon is. And speaking of that weapon, it's the Ghoul Slayer's Heavy Incinerator. You can pick this up in the Crucible quest at Sorgus Ironworks, and it's really bloody powerful. The damage output on this thing is crazy high, and the fact it uses a single fuel per shot means that ammo is never going to be a problem. You do need to aim quite high with this weapon in order to make sure you hit your target with its weird arc, but once you've got the hang of aiming this thing, it quickly becomes one of the most powerful weapons in the game. I will say, the Ghoul Slayer's effect really doesn't matter here. Ghouls would pretty consistently be a one-hit kill most of the time anyway, so if you find a better legendary variant out in the world, feel free to go for it. Your backup weapon for this build is the Shish Kebab. You pick this up at the same location as the Incinerator, and it honestly isn't needed. But it's a cool looking sword that can be set on fire, so who wouldn't want to wield it? The armour you wear is a suit of Hellfire power armour, which you can find on Enclave troopers. Get a full suit of this and max it out for incredibly good resistances. I also went with titanium plating because someone mentioned it in a comment recently. That was genuinely the reason, but it seems fine to me. I did specifically go with a jetpack and explosive vents so that I could occasionally rain fire from above and then come crashing down with explosive force. It's a badass combination, and I absolutely love it. You're not the only one in power armor though, as your follower also gets to wear the Overboss power armor from the Nuka World Gauntlet. During the quest to get your Incinerator, you'll get a couple of leg mods which prevent you from being set on fire and boost energy resistance. Problem is, these mods only work on Raider power armor sets, which the Overboss PA just so happens to be. This means you get to mod out this set pretty damn well, and best of all, it's really cheap to repair, which is something you'll need to do quite a lot. The main factions to focus on with this build are the Nuka World Raiders. Have you seen the chaos this build is causing? Of course they're going to want to go down the Raider route. You can side with one of the main game factions, if you're a boring loser with no idea of what fun is, but I'm going to leave that choice up to you. Join the Raiders, fuck shit up, and have a good time in the post-apocalypse. The follower for this build is Kate, in the Overboss power armor. Kate is your post-war girlfriend, or wife if you remember to loot the ring from Nate's body. she'll be fairly down with the raiding lifestyle for a while, and if you ever want to settle down and go a little less wild, you can finish off a follower quest to make that happen. Kit her out with any good weapons you find, and keep in mind she's happy to use chems in her inventory too. This build uses a host of overpowered equipment and a range of damage perks in order to make it simultaneously a real damage dealer and an absolute tank. Because of how ridiculously strong you are, you can pretty much just do whatever you want without having to worry too much about the consequences. I'm genuinely at kind of a loss as to what else to put in this section. You just get to fuck around in the wasteland and incinerate anyone who gets in your way. I guess the backstory will be the place to get an idea of how to roleplay the character a bit better. Back in the pre-war days, the Hellfire Hellcat was nothing like she is now. Quiet, shy, and introverted as much as a person could be, she had spent most of her life trying not to step out of line. She was raised by very traditional and controlling parents, who had already created a vision within their own minds for what their daughter's life would be, before she was even born. They decided she would have a sensible career, until she found a man to settle down with and have children of her own. She should find a nice home in the suburbs, and focus on being a mother and proud part of the family from there on out. It was all planned out, the perfect life for their perfect daughter, and all they needed was for their daughter to simply be exactly the person they wanted her to be. She was not. Their daughter had no interest in men, or in having children, and she definitely didn't want a sensible career. She wanted one that was exciting, something that would let her see the world and go to new places all the time. Every fibre of her being told her that the life her parents pushed her towards was not the one she wanted to live. But when everyone around you is telling you that the correct way to live your life isn't the way you want to, it can be hard to be yourself. Every day she put on a fake smile and kept who she was on the inside. When around her family, she always had to play the role of a daughter that they had imagined, not knowing how they would react if they knew how she felt inside. And even at school she couldn't drop the mask, knowing that someone would tell her parents if she ever approached one of their crushes, or showed an interest to anything that didn't fit the mould. During her school days she searched for a career that might fulfill her in some way. She showed interest in journalism, the military, and engineering, but every time she vocalised her interest in these paths to her parents, they simply smiled and shook their heads. They weren't the kind of jobs that a respectable lady would have, so they weren't even treated like real options. The best option that she could come up with was working at a legal firm. A lot of legal work was tedious and dull, but every once in a while there was a moment of true excitement from looking into cases or getting to go to the courtroom. And it was seen as just proper enough for her parents to get behind the idea. And so she worked hard and became a lawyer. The job was the best she could hope for, and the money meant that she was able to move out of her parents' home. For a time she thought that she was free and could maybe start living life her own way, but this feeling didn't last long. Her parents would constantly visit her at the office and phone her when she was back home, asking when she would next be free for a visit, and invite her to near endless family gatherings and events. It felt like she was always being watched, and the fact that the guards on her life approached with a smile made it all the harder to get away. If they shouted at her or attacked her in some way, at least then she might be seen as a victim of the situation. But because everyone saw them as an ideal family, she would only be viewed as a problem if she tried to live life her own way. Eventually, she buried any hopes of being true to herself, and accepted the life that was pushed upon her. She found a man who fit her parents' specifications, and who was still nice enough for her to get along with, even if the attraction wasn't there. Marrying him and moving in together made her parents happy, and the news that she was pregnant made them truly ecstatic. Their daughter was living the exact life they wanted, and all it had cost them was their daughter. Her life continued as a haze of acting as someone she was not, until the fateful day that the bombs fell. Suddenly the life that was constructed around her is blown away, and in the post-apocalypse she is free to be whoever she wants to be. The shock of it all will overwhelm her for a time, as she embraces the chaos, letting loose and going a little bit mad with her newfound freedom. She finally gets to be herself, and all it took was the end of the world itself. And that was the Hellfire Hellcat. I hope you all enjoyed this build. By the time this is out I should be mixing up character builds a bit, as I'm wanting to not just focus on 1 or 2 games where I can easily make builds, but change things up a bit and test myself by making character builds in a wide variety of RPGs. Please do subscribe if that sounds good to you, like the video if you enjoyed listening to me talk all this time, and support me, either by becoming a channel member or pledging on Patreon if you have the money to spare and think that I've earned it. As always, thanks for watching. Sarge out.